everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday night Principal Chiropractic Conference call or talk, sponsored by DE and Band of Brothers. And again, DE is coming up sooner than you think. It's August 11th through the 14th. And if you have not made reservations at the hotel, make sure you do it. It's been expanded, it's way bigger, and now we have more venues in there. So make sure you get your reservations early. And we have a special guest tonight. I was just talking to him a few minutes ago. I've introduced a lot of people who said they've been to DE since they were babies, and they were raised at DE. But this guy is truly raised at DE, and DE was a part of his home life more so than anybody else that I can think of, because he is Dr. Durie Humber's son. Many of you know him as Buddy, but he is actually Durie Humber, and we're just visiting. He graduated in 1994 from Life, but he's only been in practice for 20 years. It's coming up on his 20-year anniversary pretty quickly. But right out of school, he had some connections, and he started teaching at Life University, or Life College at that time. And so, again, I don't think there's anybody who's been on here other than Dr. Durie Humber who knows more history of DE than our guest speaker tonight. So I'm going to let you all get to know Dr. Durie Humber. Take it over, buddy.
Hey everyone, it's good to be with everybody, and I hope everyone's doing well. It's Tuesday evening here at the end of June, and I just celebrated my 53rd birthday here on the 24th, and for all of you who wish me happy birthday, I appreciate that. But I'm excited to be a part of tonight's Band of Brothers talk, and I was talking to Andy earlier about my background and just making sure that he knew that there was more than just being raised in chiropractic, but I had the wonderful opportunity to be a graduate of Life University in the 1994 September class. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience as a DE kid. I'm sure a lot of you think about what it must have been like to be around those early years. And some of my earliest memories can be of the old Sheraton Biltmore, which is down there on Spring Street, I believe, in Atlanta. It's actually been used in movies such as Driving Miss Daisy. But it's the first hotel that I can actually remember as a child being a part of. And as I understand, they passed the plate around the year of maybe 1973 or 4 when they were raising the funds to start Life College of Chiropractic back then. And so the only negative memory I have of being at the Biltmore actually was that I was known to like to play games of football, even if I didn't have a buddy to play with. And so I would toss the ball up in the hotel room, and I would run across the hotel room and catch the ball on the other side of the room. And I can remember falling and tripping and hitting the edge of a coffee table and cutting my mouth wide open and having to be rushed to the hospital for some stitches. So I'll never forget that particular memory, but that was definitely not a highlight of DE, but definitely one of my early memories from the Sheraton Biltmore. But some of the bigger memories that I have, of course, are going with the kids to all the Six Flags events. And we used to go to a lot of roller skating rinks, and we would do different things. Sometimes it might be Whitewater Park out in Marietta, but there was always activities for the kids to participate in, especially during the summer DEs. And of course, I knew all of the speakers' kids that I grew up with, and those were special times to have those types of people as your best friends, because we were all raised in a similar home life. We all understood what it was like to be kids of chiropractors and not kids of the traditional medical model. So I just assumed that everyone was raised the way we were. But obviously later, as I got older, I realized that we stood out from the crowd for sure. So as we went up in age and I got into my late teen years, as I was having to make a decision about being a chiropractor, I often remember in my earlier years being asked by many chiropractors, do you plan on being a chiropractor yourself? Do you look forward to going to Life Chiropractic College when you get a little older? And of course, I really didn't have an answer for them. You know, I had different interests in sports and in music, but there was one particular event that happened when I was about 19. I was an undergraduate student at Georgia State University, and I was just taking core courses and not made a decision on a major yet. And what happened was I was playing a pickup football game over at our church, and we were out on the field where it was getting a little bit wet on the field at night because we'd stayed around kind of late. And I was wearing tennis shoes, wasn't prepared for a slick surface, and my feet went out from under me, and I landed flat on my back. And when I landed that hard, it was such a jolt that I had a hard time standing up and even walking without electric shock pain going down my leg. And so what I found that I could do is I could walk backwards better than I could walk forwards. So I walked back to my vehicle backwards, probably about 50 yards, got in my car and drove home. But for the next 2 days, I spent the time in bed just resting because I couldn't really get up and move. So my dad at that point, I'm sure he had adjusted me a couple times at home, but he said, look, we're going to get you to Life College, get some x-rays there, maybe get you over to my brother's, which was J.K. Humber at the time. And so sure enough, I got an upper cervical adjustment from Dr. J.K. Humber, and I was just amazed at how much improvement I had within about 4 days. I would say from the time of the injury until a week later, I was about 90% well. And that was my first realization of the power of chiropractic from a traumatic standpoint, because I'd never been around any serious injuries personally that could be affected by chiropractic. And I got to thinking, if my uncle can do this, I could do this too. And then I started inquiring of my father. I said, what would it take to get in the program up at Life? And, you know, the rest is kind of history at that point, as far as guiding me to take all the classes I needed. One other advantageous thing that happened in the early 90s, it was really probably about 1989, but they were starting the accelerated courses in physics, chemistry, and biology. And I had already had my biology out of my way, but I had to get the chemistries and the physics done. And so I was able to take those courses and enter the program in spring of 91. When I graduated in 94, I had to wait until the following spring in 95 to get my license for the state of Georgia. Back then, it was no national board. It was just the state boards. And I was able to pass on the first try, got the announcement in May, and then discussed things over the next 30 days with my father about possibly teaching. And he said, well, if you're not ready to make a decision on practicing, why don't you teach? We were having a really big boom of students at the school at the time. That was during what we called the Olympic bubble. I don't know if y'all remember that Atlanta hosted the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, in 1996. And so the school was pretty much averaging about 300 to 400 new students every September. That was always the big class. And then because there was a need for teachers, I said, well, I don't feel qualified to necessarily teach in the classroom. What about another avenue? And he said, what about teaching as an instructor in the student clinic? So that's where I got my start at Life University, was teaching in the student clinic, 7th quarter. I got the worst hours they could give me, which was 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Because all the senior doctors had the 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. But those were good times. And for about 2 years, I was at the student clinic. And then a good friend of mine who had been an instructor while I was at Life as a student, he had been overseas at the England Chiropractic College, one of them, and his name was Dr. Hussein El-Sanjak. And when he returned in early 97, he asked me to join him in the proficiency department, which was the chiropractic sciences. And that was for 6th quarter, 7th quarter, and I think 13th quarter proficiency. And so I taught with Dr. El-Sanjak for a couple of years. And then finally, I got the opportunity around 1999 to teach line drawing for upper cervical classes, such as 3rd and 4th quarter upper cervical line drawing. And so that was how I kind of finished out my time until I took a sabbatical in 2000, where I spent about 9 months away from the school, looking strongly at Colorado as being a chance for me to practice out west. But as it turned out, I ended up doing a little bit of interning with a chiropractor in Blairsville named Dr. Mark Baker. He was actually an associate chiropractor with J.K. Humber, and he was just a whiz at upper cervical, especially the Grostic procedure. And so I learned so much working with him from the months of July to December 31st of 2000. And as I returned in January of 2001 to life, I asked Dr. Progrellis if there was an opportunity in one of the clinics, and she put me at the Lucky Street Clinic downtown. In that location, many of you remember as being directly across the street from the now large aquarium that is the Georgia Aquarium. So while I was down there from 2001 until summer of 2002, I met some doctors that were from Stockbridge, and they asked me to come join their practice. And so I made the decision to leave life and join their practice in July of 2002. So as I was telling Dr. Harding, I'm coming up on literally less than 2 weeks to my anniversary of 20 years in chiropractic. And what was very interesting about the timing of my leaving Life University was that the very day after I left Life was the day that they lost their accreditation. And, you know, I was as shocked as everyone that the accreditation had been pulled. And we kind of all know how that worked out. But it was still a matter of timing for me to be able to go into practice and use the next 3 years as practicing a group with a group called Discover Chiropractic. And then by the summer of 2005, I split off and I ended up being in my own practice about 2 miles down the street here in Stockbridge, Georgia. And I've been here ever since. So the last 17 years I've been in this location because I'm currently in my office, as you can tell. And so obviously during all of these years, DE has been a huge part of my life. I can't say that I've been to every DE for the entirety since I was born, but I can certainly say that I've been at the majority of them. And I just want to first talk a little bit. I know I've given my background, but I really want to talk about Dr. Sid and his influence in my life. As you can imagine, being Durie Humber's son, I knew of Dr. Sid Williams probably before I was even able to know who he was. But I can remember many times as a young person from my adolescent and teenage years into my 20s, I can remember going to many Braves games with him. And I can remember just how the crowd would respond to Dr. Sid because he had such a magnetism that he could walk into, I would say he could walk into a room, but he could walk into a stadium. And everyone that was around me as I was walking in front of Sid was turning and pointing back up the stairs like, look who's here, you know, and it was like being at the front of the Beatles, you know, as they're coming through because it was quite a doing when Dr. Sid entered the room and everybody knew who he was. And everybody just usually would light up with their face. They always smiled at Dr. Sid because I think he always made them smile because I think Dr. Sid had a way of making everyone feel important, even though they kind of were in awe of his importance. He always made them feel like he was approachable. And he was always so welcoming to everybody we came in contact with. And that was a real teachable moment for me, just to see that someone like him never looked down on any particular person as being not worth his time. But if he had a chance to talk to, you know, the lowliest person, it could be a taxi driver on the way to a meeting, he would always strike up conversation and try to live that dynamic, essential principle that he preached. And so that always was the leadership that he provided to me, to where I really understood what living the DE principle was like, just watching Dr. Sid. And I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, I want to bring this picture. I hope you guys can see it. This was day one. Dr. Sid's on my, let's see in that picture, he's on my left. And my dad, of course, is on the right. And I thought I'd pull this picture out because you can see I actually had a lot of hair back then. And my dad's hair was much darker. And that was a picture of day one, spring 1991. And my dad, I remember him saying to me, son, you want to step over here and get a picture with Dr. Sid, because this is a piece of history for you. And we won't always have him around, but he's a historical figure in chiropractic. And you need to recognize what a distinct privilege it is for you to get your picture on your first day of chiropractic college. And so I really have always cherished this picture amongst other memorabilia that I have from DE's and Dr. Sid's books. All right. The next thing I want to mention is just that I have a few books up here behind me that I really recommend that are Sid's books. Two of them you probably are more familiar with, and one not as familiar. But I also want to mention another book that I really got a lot out of. And this actually, I noticed I was reading this the first time 20 years ago as I started my practice. It was recommended to me. And it's called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. And what I find really interesting about this book is the author actually played professional baseball in the early 20th century. He was literally playing in like 1907. And he talks about his story of being cut from the team. He basically got fired from a minor league baseball team, and he had to go and work in a league that was much lower level than that as a result. And I think he said something about he was getting paid $150 a month on his first team. And after he got fired, he went down to $25 a month. And then the story goes on to say that because he determined at that point to get a tryout with a team back at the normal level that he was used to, 5 days later, he put on such a show of enthusiasm because he had been cut by his first boss. And when he asked his first boss, the manager of his team, they said, the reason we cut you is not your talent, it's the fact that you're lazy. And so he took it upon himself to never be called lazy again. And he used enthusiasm as being his number one ideal for getting attention so that he wouldn't have the trouble of losing his job again, and he could set an example. So I thought this was such an interesting book about what a difference enthusiasm makes. And I know that's consistent with living the DE principle that Dr. Sid talks about, and just thought I'd share that book with y'all. It's not a doctor, but his name is Mr. Frank Bettger is the author. And then again, these other books you're familiar with. You've got the Lasting Purpose book, and then this one about the road to success is in the heart, starts in the heart. But one of those that you're not as familiar with is Looking Back to See Ahead. This was actually published by Life College in 1994. I don't think the school had quite gone to a university level at that time. So you'll see on the side of the book that it's published by Life College. And I wanted to read a quote that I don't think most of you have heard from Dr. Sid. And I really liked it. I thought it's what I'd like to close with tonight, as far as I have that point plus one additional point. But as far as Dr. Sid's portion of my talk tonight, I wanted to read this. It says, from early childhood, I have had a profound reverence for the wee small voice within myself that I listened to as a young boy. And since that time, I've found a spiritual peace that I call an innate awareness. I seek for myself a constant moment-by-moment relationship with this innate understanding, and I yield to the wisdom that this relationship provides me in my many pursuits. So I hope that quote resonates with you. And I just wanted to finish with the fact that I really want to give a shout out to all the leadership of the current DE, because I know I spent a lot of time talking about my remembrances of the past, and there were so many great speakers and chiropractors that came across the stage while I was growing up. But I want to give a shout out to the current leadership of DE and what they're doing. Steve Judson, Brian Lieberman, and I know I'm only touching on a couple names there, and there are many more that are doing an outstanding job, including Dr. Harding that did my introduction. But I also want to say that the message of DE has not changed since my childhood. And the one constant philosophy that goes through every DE is just the teaching of unconditional love. And so I want to finish with the lasting purpose, which is to love, to give, to serve, to do out of your own abundance with no expectation of return. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight to all of you. And I hope it's been as much of a blessing for you as it has been for me. And look forward to seeing you at the next DE in August here in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you.
Buddy, you hit a home run. Thank you so much, my man.
Thanks, man.
You kept going back to the DE principle and the DE lifestyle, and you said it so eloquently. And I can honestly say I didn't know Dr. Sid until the very end of his time,
Right.
and I came in late to the party for him, but
Okay.
I've told, and I know there's hundreds of people that come to DE now who look to your family as the epitome of what it stands to give love and serve out of your own abundance and no expectation of return, and living not learning but living the DE principle life, and
Right.
I want to be the first, and as many of us all thank you for sharing your father and your family, and your family's been your mom, your dad, their relationship, and all you kids has been just I mean, just like the model of how we all want to raise our kids, and how all we want to have relationship with our spouses and our children and everything. So like we were talking before, I'm sure your mom got tired of the phone calls from Dr. Sid at 3 o'clock in the morning, midnight, whatever. But we really want to thank you and your family for sharing, your life with us. We really appreciate it, and that was a home run, and you threw out some nuggets there. That was absolute wonderful talk. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Andy. And I know it's always good to meet people who come late to the party, but who fit in as though they were there from the beginning. And I know we can say that about you and what you've added to DE over the last several years. And I'm always appreciative of what you have to say about my parents, because they are the epitome of the kind of parents that we'd all love to enjoy. And I don't mind sharing them with everyone because I know that they set the example.
Well, we absolutely appreciate it, and I think if you're new to the party again, I've been here 15 years. Some people on this call or this talk tonight, maybe you've never been to DE, but like he said, that picture of him with Dr. Sid and Dr. Humber, his dad. If you've not been to DE or not been able to give DD Humber a handshake or a hug, get down there, because he has living history of chiropractic, and he's the epitome of what giving lasting purpose is all about. So we really appreciate your time tonight, man, and can't wait to get a hug here in August.
All right. We'll look forward to seeing you down here in Georgia.
Love and appreciate you, man.
Take care, brother.
God bless you. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Appreciate it.